So good evening. Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited about the tremendous turnout. This is the Coalition on Diversity and Equity's 10th Community Forum and our 5th on topic of housing. My name is Amy DiMatteo, and My name's Amy DiMatteo, and I'm the president of the Coalition on Diversity and Equity. I'd like to begin our evening tonight by acknowledging the land on which we gather was originally the territory of the Mohegan and Wampanoag peoples. We thank them for their strength and resilience in stewarding this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. I'd also like to thank Father Ron and St. Peter's for allowing us to use this beautiful space. Thank you. I think most of you know what CODE is about, but I'm going to give you a little background just in case. CODE is a nonprofit organization that formed in July 2020. In addition to Hebron, we also now serve the towns of Andover, Columbia, and Marlborough. Our mission is to build more diverse, equitable, and vibrant communities. Our goals include increasing community awareness and equal access to housing, education, and jobs. And community conversations like this one are an important part of our work. We believe that through education and discussion, people can better understand how and why our communities have become so segregated, and how we can begin to make changes that benefit us all. Tonight's conversation focuses on the very real issue of the lack of affordable housing throughout our state and in our communities. This affects everyone, including our young professionals, the kids graduating college, moving on to their careers, our seniors, working families. Because of the rising housing costs, the lack of housing choices, especially affordable housing, and stagnant or slow growth wages, many healthcare workers, our teachers, first responders, restaurant workers, retail workers, they're not able to live in the places that they work. I'm sure it comes as no surprise of those who live in Hebron that less than 3% of our housing stock is deemed affordable. It's pretty much the same in Andover, Marlborough, and Columbia as well. The vast majority, like 90% of our housing, are single-family homes, meaning that there are very few apartments available for those who can't afford or just don't want to live in a home and live in a house. Between 21 and 26% of the households in these 4 towns are cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. For the renters in our community, the percentage is as high as 67% are cost-burdened. The good news is that progress is being made. Each of the towns we serve in created an affordable housing plan with specific goals. Most of them asked residents for feedback through community surveys. Several of the plans reference specific possible sites for development. And tonight you'll hear about the plans for a mixed income housing development here in Hebron. But there's no doubt much work lies ahead, starting with educating people about the benefits and correcting the many myths that exist about affordable housing. And that's why we're here tonight. We're fortunate to have an amazing panel here of experts on these complex issues. Before we start, I want to let you know that there are cards available. They're index cards, and we've got them over there. Feel free to write your questions to our panelists on them, and we will have Mandy over there collect them, and we'll ask the panelists to answer your questions at the end of the evening. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this discussion, Claudia Riley. Claudia is a Hebron resident, a super duper active volunteer, and the Vice President and Community Liaison Officer for Webster Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, taking time out of your very busy lives to come here to St. Peter's and really listen and learn, engage, and go out into the community and spread the word and the message of what we're trying to do here tonight. So what I'm going to do at this point is introduce each of our amazing panelists. The experience, the education, the passion of these folks just collectively could fill the universe 3 times over. We are so incredibly blessed to have this panel here, and they're going to be sharing a lot of amazing words with us tonight. So first, I'd like to introduce Brandon McGee. Brandon McGee currently serves as the Deputy Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Housing. Before that, he served as a Connecticut State Representative for the 5th District for 8 years. Brandon cares deeply about community service and advocating equality for all. In 2021, as State Representative, he successfully led a campaign to declare racism a public health crisis. Understanding the power of relationships, he created an initiative called the 50-50 Club, offering young men of color the opportunity to be mentored by professional men of color. He serves in leadership positions on numerous nonprofits, including Ascend Mentoring, BSL Education Foundation, Hartford Behavioral Health, HARC, and the Citadel of Love. Next on our panel, we have Hebron's own Pamela Atwood. Pamela Atwood is a resident of Hebron, and she's been very active in our community. Pam owns Atwood Dementia Group and is a licensed professional counselor associate and supports a support group facilitator for the Alzheimer's and American Parkinson Disease Associations. She was previously executive director of Colebrook Village, a senior living community here in Hebron. Pam also served as the board chair of the former Commission on Aging and currently serves on the Hartford Foundation's Greater Together Community Fund for Hebron. Next on our panel, we have Carlene Charmelis. She is the Collective Impact and Equity Manager for the Partnership for Strong Communities, where she leads the Home Connecticut campaign. Previously, Carlene worked for the United Community and Family Services, where she helped individuals and families apply for health insurance through the Access Health CT Exchange. Previously, she served as a public policy planner for Access Community Action Agency. Carlene is also very involved in her community, serving in leadership positions for several nonprofits, including Sankofa Education and Leadership and the NAACP, as well as her city's Board of Education, which, I will add, she is running for her 3rd term for her town Norwich Board of Education. So give it up, that's great. Next we have, and my personal favorite, I have to admit, Ron Kalinowski. He is the rector of St. Peter's Episcopal Church right here, and the vice president of the Commons Community Development Corporation, which was created to address the need for affordable housing, beginning in Hebron and eventually expanding to other communities within Connecticut. Ron has also served as vicar of St. James in Preston and an associate at Trinity Church in Hartford. Previously, he worked for 20 years for the National Association for Home Care and Hospice. And last but not least, Beth Sibilia. Beth is a director of the Center for Housing Equity and Opportunity of Eastern Connecticut, right here in our backyard. As an attorney, she was in private practice for more than 26 years in New London. Beth was elected to be Select Woman for Waterford and Mayor of New London. She also served on the City Council Board of Education and Housing Authority in New London. Her numerous volunteer activities include serving as a member of the Board of Trustees of Connecticut College. And she's also a current member of Waterford RISE, which stands for Residents for Inclusion and Social Equity. So what we're going to do tonight is have a panel presentation. I'm going to be asking our panelists some questions, just for everyone to have sort of first shot at the microphone. Each new question will go to another person in line, okay? So we're going to start with, since I started last with Beth's bio, we're going to start first with the questions. So first question, why is this issue of affordable housing important to you? Why should communities create more housing choices?
Thank you, Good evening, everyone. First, I want to say thank you to St. Peter's for hosting us, and thank you to Code for pulling us together. And finally, thank you to the residents that have come out to hear about housing tonight. I think the crowd in the room is pretty telling that this is a crucial issue in our communities. So you're asking me to describe why it's important to me, and I look out and I see why that it's important to you too, right? We're talking about housing options at all levels of the housing quote scale or market, decoupling the commoditization of rentals, certain rental units that has been occurring in some of our larger suburban areas and some of our smaller cities here in Eastern Connecticut. And certainly making sure that people in Hebron and Columbia and Andover and Marlborough have choices, that they don't have to leave their communities to find housing options. We hear that over and over again. I was a probate and real estate lawyer for a couple decades, and very often choices were made not because it was, one going in that you were prepared to do, but one that you had to do, moving out of your community where your doctors are, where your friends are, where you've raised your children. And I think that's crumbling the foundations of our communities, and we've got to stop it in Eastern Connecticut. So that's why it's important to me.
I'm not going to repeat everything she just said, but I do want to thank you. Since they didn't clap for us, we had to tell them to clap for us.
It's a guy thing.
It is. There you go. But thank you so much for hosting tonight's conversation. It is always very telling of a community when we are able to sit in a living room style, for the sake of describing this, how intimate this is, the importance of housing. And so to see all of you out on this evening really, really says a lot about the town. And it's also encouraging when you think about the state of Connecticut with respect to housing. And not just talking about it from a macro level, but really getting down into the weeds. Affordable housing isn't an issue. It should be considered a basic need that everybody has a right to. So if we're able to start there, then I believe we fully understand that a person having access to a safe, quality, sanitary unit or a home yields itself to having the ability to thrive in life, education, employment, you name it. And so housing is just, it's the central, it's the most critical piece that one would have access to. And so for me, having grown up in apartments, in homes, I understand the importance of housing. So lived experience is really, like many of you, understand how important it is. But to me, being in this role has really afforded me a great opportunity to help lift many of our communities throughout the state from where they are. Oh, you have a mic.
Yes, we have 3 down here and 3
Where?
up there. I'm going to come at this from the point of view of a faith leader. For me, housing touches something that is so core to the human condition and is something that's a deeply spiritual issue. Providing that physical place for people creates an important word. We're creating homes, not houses. Establishing home is what empowers us as people, helps us grow as families, provides a center of our identity, and honors the basic dignity of every human being. It creates the possibility for our relationships and builds community, which often seems lacking today very much around us, and is so core to the fundamental well-being of every town. Think of when you were growing up in your neighborhood, when you were younger. I mean, I used to go next door and call. You would get on the front porch, you would say, Johnny, you wouldn't ring the doorbell, you would call their name or whatever. You could walk over there and do that. I would say most of us didn't have an experience of 3-acre plots where we rarely interacted with our brothers and sisters in the neighborhoods. It was real community that we were building there. And to me, being close with neighbors and building that kind of community is at the heart of why this is important, both to me personally, as a faith leader, and as part of this project here in Hebron.
Wow, that's hard to follow. Uh, so I'm gonna start by quickly reading the vision and the mission of my organization's work. So the partnership is a statewide organization that's dedicated to ensuring that everyone in Connecticut have a safe, stable home that is affordable to them in an equitable community of their choice. And our mission is to promote equitable change in Connecticut housing policy by coordinating advocacy, advancing research, and uniting diverse partners. And I just read that because when I graduated, I think when you read my bio, when I graduated school, one of the work that I was doing as part of my internship was to do the community needs assessment for Talum and Windham County, and some of the cities and some of the towns that are participating tonight was towns that I actually researched. So housing kept coming up, and that was in 2014. Housing kept coming up as a major issue, and I was like, after I graduate school, I need to find an organization that's going to help me to help resolve some of the issues that I was seeing. And so then why is this important to me? So I immigrated to the United States at the age of 12, and I immigrated to the States from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And as an adolescent, my mom and we had moments where we were doubling up with family friends and getting access to a public housing authority unit, and then later on a housing voucher, really helped us to be able to afford housing, right? So that's why it's important to me. There are many families, especially children and young adults, who are living in places that's not meant for human habitation, who are couch surfing right now, who are doubling up with friends or families. And right now we are also seeing an increase in the rate of eviction in our state. And recently in the Connecticut Mirror, there was an article around the fact that family homelessness is on the rise. So, and we know from research that one of the reasons that people end up experiencing eviction is due to lack of not being able to afford their home. So, Claudia already mentioned, and Amy noted before, there are many people who are housing cost burden, and they are paying more than 30% of their income on rent. And we have people who are extremely housing cost burden in our state tonight, and they're paying more than 50% of their income on rent. So I like to interact with audiences when I'm on panel, so I hope that's okay. I wanted to quickly ask, just with a show of hands, how many of you who are joining us tonight who are either experiencing housing instabilities or have experienced housing instabilities or know someone in your community who's experiencing housing instability? Or know someone, yeah. So that is the reality that many people face. So if you can afford to cover the cost of where you live, as well as meet your the necessities, your home may be affordable. But we have a whole group of people who are locked out and cannot cover their housing costs, and we need to be intentional in our approach because, first of all, it is the right thing to do. And like Brendan said, housing is a basic human need. So that is that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I can't believe I'm here. So I don't know how this happened. Ram alum, Gilead Hill, yada, yada, yada. Worked for Gail Kataja for quite a long time. You know, I look at the audience and I see, hi, Kevin Connors, and, you know, all of these folks I grew up with. I'm here and I'm passionate about this for two reasons. I'm a taxpayer in this town and I can't afford my taxes anymore. And number two, I'm an employer in this town and the people who I need to hire can't afford to live anywhere near me. I am passionate about this because I'm also, as an Alzheimer's specialist, not afraid of the scary stuff. And I think that growing up here with two parents, and I don't know why they're not sitting together, but okay. I guess Gary Carlson, you know, Dad really wanted to say hi more than sit with Mom. It's okay, it's all good. I think that, you know, growing up in town when we heard about the NIMBY, you know, when that was first a thing, and then it became, well, we don't want them here. Them? You mean like immigrants who come from Haiti? Oh my God, how scary is she? You know, so, and I'm sure your mother's lovely, you know. I think that we need to start facing the fears and the scary things. I'm not saying that I want my town to turn into, you know, inner city Hartford thing, although I've got to tell you, I drove through Hartford a lot of years and worked in Hartford for a lot of years, and they've got some great communities there. I want healthy and happy here. I moved back here after 10 years of living in Newington because this is home. And I knew, as I was just saying to Mandy earlier, that if I got in a snow-related car accident on my way back from Colebrook Village, that probably the person who stopped and pulled over to help me would probably be somebody I knew, or someone my parents knew, or someone else I knew them, you know? This is a great community. I can remember when I was graduating from college and I couldn't afford to live here, and my mom and dad said, you're not supposed to be able to afford to live where you grew up. Well, now we can't afford to live anywhere. My sister's rent is now, she lives in Rocky Hill. She now pays more in rent than I pay for my mortgage. But I'm going to tell you, that was a mortgage that I got in 2010. There's no way I could afford to buy my house now. And because of what I do as an aging specialist, I know, I mean, my second mom from growing up just had to move into affordable housing and is not in Hebron anymore. And she lived in this community for how many, 50, 60 years now? That's sad. We can do better than that for our citizens. And that's not just a Hebron thing. That's a national issue. I think it's only 4% of all stock of housing in the US is handicapped and elderly accessible. 4%. That's disgusting. So we can do better, and I'm really excited to have the conversations and to face the fears and to figure out what's possible for our town. So thank you.
Thank you. The energy is already very palpable. It's exciting. So we're going to move on to our second question, and Brandon, you're in the hot seat now.
Cool.
Okay, so the second question is, why is there a housing affordability crisis in Connecticut? And what are the barriers to create more affordable housing, especially in rural communities like Hebron?
So I did my homework, and I wrote my questions out like my friend here, responses, and I'm going to read them because I want you to hear me loud and clear, and sometimes I get overly passionate. You miss my point. But I think we are having a really, really interesting conversation, and I can't wait to hear from each of you. But the why as to how housing affordability crisis is extremely complicated, and I think you all will agree. There's no single reason. It is a combination of factors and constantly changing. Housing affordability has been an issue in the great state of Connecticut off and on since World War II, which was when the state of Connecticut first committed a huge amount of resources to create housing opportunities across our state. From a shortage of supply to the high cost of living, from transportation issues, cost as well as access to employment, there have been significant changes in our community makeup. And I think it was already mentioned, many of our communities are now a little different. It's not the typical family as one might define it, but not to mention that we have had some of the least affluent, Bridgeport, Hartford, communities in the country to some of the most affluent, New Canaan and others, or Canaan, depending on where you're from, communities within less than an hour's drive time of each other. We have some communities with significant public infrastructure, and other neighboring communities that have little to none. So if you really want to better understand a lot of the barriers many of our communities are faced with throughout the entire state, I encourage you all to simply go to DOH's website, and you can look at our analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. And it really, really, in full color, tell you what's happening with respect to affordable housing being developed in the state of Connecticut. But I'll say this in closing, and this is where I get in trouble when I add stuff. But housing affordability, and I think I'll pause because I think we're gonna get into this later on with respect to communities and their thoughts on affordable housing. But I'll just say this, affordable housing is not the brick buildings and a bunch of folks living on top of each other, although that's how I grew up. Yep. And it was still a community. Affordable housing has everything to do with one being able to pay or utilize 30% of their income, as already mentioned. Yep. And that's not happening in Connecticut as we speak. Oh, you don't need my mic. You're going now?
That's okay.
Yeah, I'll go last.
All right, I see how we're going down the road here.
You're
Okay.
gonna be on the hot seat.
Okay,
next.
I'm on the hot seat next. I agree with everything he just said, and but I think that I'm gonna look at the local level here. I think we thought we were fostering community in the way we developed small towns like the town of Hebron. We really thought we were really building community, and I think that's true to a degree. However, our zoning laws have been a barrier, a huge barrier to other forms of housing where we where you can build quite a few houses on, I'm on less than a half acre in my home in Stores, and we don't need these huge lots. They're for some, but not for everyone. But the zoning has been a big thing, and the truth of the Hebron is we think we are a farming community. My friends, we are not a farming community. We are a suburban community that now has farmland, and largely because a lot of the farms have been eaten up because of our zoning policies that have eaten up more and more of this rural character we're desperate to preserve. So I think zoning is the area I just wanted to touch on.
Okay, I'll just co-sign on both of the both statements, and I think the only thing I can add to that, because I am in agreement and consensus, is I work a lot with numbers, so I like to share numbers with people wherever I'm at. So I think you earlier alluded to the fact that the prices of homes is astronomical right now. So I did some Googling before coming in. The average cost to purchase a home in Connecticut right now is around $260,000. It might be a little bit more in your community. So it's expensive. And then when you think about what currently exists in communities, we have a shortage of rental units that are affordable and available for or extremely low income population, and then of the publicly supported rental homes that's available in our states. Currently, there's about 72,989. 5,250 of them are expiring in the next 5 years. So not only do we have a shortage, but some of the available stocks that we have available is at risk of expiring. So, and then we also have a rental vacancy rate. So there is, so why? You noted the zoning and land use policies that does not permit the creation of affordable housing. And then in terms of like rural communities, some of what research shows is that development often does not happen in larger scales, and that the cost for construction, building new development, are often higher in rural communities compared to urban areas, which really reduces the incentive for private investment. So I just wanted to add those thoughts.
I agree with everything they just said, ditto. And I will add the two things that I kind of have observed in thinking about these questions. What are some of the barriers? We have the wonderful myth of nostalgia. We think in this town and everywhere else, I spend a lot of time with older adults doing reminiscence. And we think about the glory days and, oh, you remember the Bronx bombers and we got this and we've got, and that reminiscence is wonderful, but it can also hold us back from tremendous growth. And as I said before, being able to afford our taxes to pay for the schools that our kids deserve, that's only going to happen if we can bring in more business. And if we can't bring in more business because we don't have the housing to support the employees, we're going to end up like we had with Dunkin' Donuts this year with people, okay, well, Dunkin' Donuts is closed this afternoon. What? What about my coffee? My goodness, how spoiled are we, right? So we have this myth of nostalgia, but I can remember when we were afraid of a Dunkin' Donuts or something coming in here. We don't want to be like Colchester with a McDonald's. Ugh. And I can remember when we were building the high school and we had conversations about should we put in a pool. And I know Steve Weir was here before because we could be swimming and we could compete with Glastonbury. Well, I can remember us all saying, we don't have to compete with Glastonbury, we're Hebron. And now I know there are a whole lot of us in town who would like to have a pool. It would be a really great community feature, right? So our myths of nostalgia really do then prohibit our own growth in the future. And the other thing is that fear of the future. We worry about the fears of what will this do to our community. It's not going to do anything we don't let it do. If we do it with good intent, with cooperation and collaboration, with our eyes wide open, we can create whatever it is that we want for our community, whether that's for affordable housing for older adults, whether it's for physically or otherwise abled people, whether it's for young adults. We can do whatever, or multi-use. My best friend does high-end housing development, and a certain percent of each one of her properties has to be allocated for affordable housing. And she said it doesn't look any different. There are ways to do this very beautifully, with a lot of charm and with a lot of character that we all want for our town, but which will allow our growth.
So I agree with everything previously said. There are a couple other things that the infrastructure, one of the questions is, how does it impact rural communities? The lack of infrastructure and movement on site sewage disposal has been impediment to further development of land that may be ripe for development. So that's one piece in a rural community that I hear again and again. Lack of access to transportation is another. Senior housing is great, but if there's nothing, if there's no microbus or transportation or senior bus in your community, you still have lack of access to resources. So the other thing is we've had a lack of building starts in the state of Connecticut. So somebody said it's nostalgia. I had written down land of steady habits, right? It is that way because it's been that way. It'll always be that way because I said so, right? That kind of, so, there's that kind of, we don't want this developed, and a lot of opposition or kind of inertia about developing the state of Connecticut. And in particular, I was a veteran of at least 2 real estate recessions as a real estate lawyer. Had heartbreaking situations of families leaving homes due to foreclosure, improper mortgage products, that sort of thing. People wonder if we are going to return to that. In all of the people that I talk to, the experts in the field, the answer is no, because we're so far behind in our building starts. We got stuck in the recession, and because we're in the land of steady habits, we never really got ourselves out of it. We didn't build like other communities built. And then finally, there is something to be said about NIMBYism, quite frankly, and racism. This is something that I think communities need to confront and talk about. I live in the town of Waterford Residents for Inclusion and Social Equity, and I sat and I listened to an 830G proposal that came in. And I pulled someone aside and I said, do you understand how you sound? We're friends. Do you understand how you sound? And it really took that kind of trust and sitting down and talking about how the person sounded to get through to them that they were actually holding on to racist ideas. And not only that, but going to a public hearing and espousing an opinion based on a racist idea. But it takes time as a community and space to do that. And a lot of these housing developments, they engage you too late or not at all. And you don't have sufficient time as a community. So I think, there's NIMBYism, racism, and then lack of time for an honest discussion. So I think those are impediments.
Thank you for that, panel. So now we're going to start with Father Ron, and we're going to be moving on to our third question. What are some myths about affordable housing, or what we call workforce housing, that you'd like to correct?
I think it comes straight to where we just left off in terms of racism, in terms of othering of people, those people, and that if we have affordable housing, we're going to have a building that is run down, that people don't care about, that don't take pride in, that is really not the kind of housing that we all aspire to now. Though some of those mistakes have been made. But I don't know about you, but when I got out of college, I lived on Capitol Hill in D.C., and I found an apartment for $300, which was all that I could afford because I made $10,000 a year. And that was more than half my take-home salary to pay for that $300. And that really stretched me. But, how do you get a start when you are coming out of college, and the barriers that are there are, and I think it's, and the people that live and work in this town are people that are part of this community, whether they live here or not. I want to share a story of one of our people who preached this Sunday at my church on the topic of being faithful stewards. And he said, he was having a conversation with somebody at Ted's grocery store here, who is just a lovely person. Everyone knows her. She makes everyone feel welcome. And she said, I love this town, but I simply can't afford to live here. Those are the kind of people you want to live here in this town. I'll give you another example. We have a rectory built in 1860, a few doors down, where we're going to be putting our housing. And to be honest, I was not going to live there because I own a home in Mansfield. And I've owned it almost 20 years, and I wasn't going to sell my house to move into an 1860s house that needed a lot of work. for, and not knowing how many years I would be here and so forth. So we thought, what do we do with this house? So Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and a number of the people from Puerto Rico were coming to Connecticut, as you know, because they had family and friends here. And so I said, what if we found a housing insecure family, and in exchange for the free use of the rectory and free housing and utilities to a certain level of support that we provide utilities, that this person became the sexton to take care of our buildings and our grounds, and he now works at RAM as the star employee in the maintenance department. His name is Angel, and he's well named because he loves this town. He loves everything about it. He loves this church. He takes great care of us. He takes great care of the school. That's the kind of person you want to have in this community.
So with that note, loving your town and loving your communities really is oftentimes why we choose to live in the places. And so myths. I wrote down a lot of things, but I'm not even going to read them. I'm actually going to segue away from my talking points because I brought you all some handouts. So it's at the back. It's the myths and facts around 830G. So I'm going to give you homework after this event today to spend some time reading about that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with me. But what I want to say in regard to this is that the housing market will never build affordable housing. It will always lean towards building luxury apartments, housing, or single family development. And unless our funders and our community members decide and say that in any housing development that gets proposed in my community, there needs to be some conditions that make certain units, or that has some set aside units that's affordable, and that we are intentional in those efforts. You won't be able to change to shift the needle, because the market will never do it on its own. So I'm gonna say, as a community, we do need to be intentional in our work. The market is not gonna do it for us. Thank you.
Excellent point. I don't know that I'm qualified to correct a lot of the myths. I will say that in my experience, many myths come from a basis in reality. And we probably need to open our eyes about that too. One of the myths that I think about when I was working, we were developing Colebrook Village, one of the myths that I heard in our community, well, the problem with senior housing is it just sucks services. And it's just constantly, it's need. I'm going to tell you very honestly, we have a real problem with Colebrook Village and a volunteer fire department, because every time someone falls, we have to have someone come out and evaluate whether or not they need to go to the hospital. And that's a huge burden on our volunteers. I agree with that. That doesn't mean we don't do it. That means we have to get together and figure out how to solve the problem. We're a community of very bright individuals. And I don't like putting up a barrier. I like to hop over that barrier and see what we can do to fix it. So I would rather say, okay, if we've got this myth about people in affordable housing for, any age group, multifamily, what have you, that what we need to do is look at how can we even just flip the narrative? Yeah, they're using services, but that also creates a whole lot of opportunity, because as a person who graduated with a degree that was basically worthless because I couldn't get a job in the field of gerontology until I met Gail Katasha, thank you very much. I think that here's an opportunity. If we need more social workers in town, we can bring them in if we can then also have the businesses that can support, you know, the tax base, et cetera, et cetera. So here we go. It's just the same conversation I feel like I'm saying over and over. But again, I just want to try to say that whether we think it's a myth, whether it's true or not, let's look at where does that fear come from and how can we creatively solve the problem.
I wish we could just unpack everything that you said, because it's true. And I think that's the crux of the conversation in some cases. But a few myths. Where do we start? I will say this. Families from outside of this beautiful town are families that look like the families in this space here. Contrary to what we think sometimes, we think that these families are different and they don't have the same ideals as those of us in this space. So that's one myth. I think most of what the average person thinks about affordable housing is a myth, regardless. People hear the term and they immediately picture large scale, as I said before, multi-story brick builds that were built in the 1950s and 60s, and some of us affectionately call them projects. I grew up in a project. As a matter of fact, it was called Westbrook Village, and now it's called The Village. But a lot of people do not realize that a significant portion of their communities were affordable. Affordable housing at one time or another, and simply have become part of the fabric that is their community. I can go through a bunch of details from 1960s all the way on up, but I'll spare you the time. But one important piece that I think you all should know is workforce housing is not a term that our department we embrace, okay, or like to use. We prefer the more accurate term, middle income housing. People who earn at or near the minimum wage are the backbone of our economic structure. They deserve a decent and safe space to live, grow their families, and enjoy their life. That is what we as a department hope to build under the new program that we refer to as Build for CT. It's administered by CHFA, which is the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, on behalf of the Department of Housing. And we believe it can create more than 6,000 or 6,400 units by the time we are asked to leave and allow for someone else to take our positions. So we have an aggressive goal of developing new housing opportunities for hardworking families in our state. But there's so many myths when you talk about housing, and I'm going to continue to repeat this because you all deserve to be applauded and appreciated to have these conversations. And it's not like you all are forced to be here. You're here because you want to see some things change in this community proper, but for the state of Connecticut. And I believe these conversations will serve as a catalyst for other communities that are saying, well, I think it's a great idea, but I'm not sure if we're willing to go down that path. So again, as a former elected official, a state representative who served as the chair of the legislature's housing committee, these are the conversations that I wish we were having a while back. But I am just, again, I just can't say thank you enough for this conversation.
Oh, miss.
No, you went.
I went, didn't I?
Although, you go back.
Thank you. And I like the new term I just learned tonight, middle income housing. All right, very good. All right, so now we're moving on to the fourth question for our panelists. And now we're going to start with Carlene. The fourth question is, what can be done to create more housing choices? And what funding opportunities or other resources are available to towns such as Hebron?
So actually, I'll pick up where Brendan left. I think he already dropped one of the resources that's available. The Build for CT program is something that's available for cities and towns. And I just want to share that there's a list of resources that's available on the partnership website, and I'll make sure that I share the link with you and Donna so that you can circulate it to everyone. Just taking time to actually list all of the resources that's available might be a little bit daunting, so I'll make sure that I follow up on that. But echoing what Brendan said is around continuing these community conversation, right? Talking about what does a community need, right? If you're not talking and you're not discussing what you're envisioning for your community and you're not collaborating with others who share those visions and are looking forward to doing that work, then that reality will not come into place. And I think I always talk about, we need to ensure that people have more mental assistance, more vouchers is always a way to build more housing choices so that people can move into your lovely community. Before I got here, I was able to go to, I got lost, so I drove past down there. I know, but it was a good thing. I drove and I was about to do a turn on the Raymond Brook Preserved. Yeah, so I was like, oh, I can stay here for a minute. So I went for a walk around. I did get lost in the little loop as well, but I'm here now. I get lost without a GPS. But so it's an opportunity, and everyone I met while I was walking was very lovely. So they helped me navigate back to my car. So you have a really lovely community. So having vouchers available for people who may be interested in moving into your area is something that could help provide that choice. And then more funding for development of new housing in your communities. And I'm pretty sure we'll be hearing some more about what are some of the work that's happening soon. And then some flexibilities in your zoning and land use policies is a way to do that, to allow accessory dwelling units and multifamily housing or mixed use housing in your communities. And I think that Hebron and Marlborough have permitted the usage of ADUs. I'm not sure what it looks like for Columbia and Andover, so I would love to hear from the public about what that permit looks like for ADU. And then the last thing is around really ensuring that housing is part of your town's economic development, because you can't aim to bring in new business into your town and engage new workers if you're not thinking about where they're going to live, as well as some of the amenities that's going to be offered to people. I'm not moving into a town if I can't find a hairdresser to do my hair. So I'm just saying. Oh, you got, okay. Okay. So Hebron is a possibility now. And I think that's all I'm going to say for that. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we've got great parks and things and some good hairdressers, but you should know, as someone who's reliant on GPS, we have a lot of dead zones. So you may want to just start to get a compass or something. No. So what can be done? And again, funding opportunity is not my strength, although I do have a really good friend who does that. And I can certainly introduce her around. But what can we do? We can start having conversations like we're doing right now. Talk to your friends. I love that we filled this room, but baby, we should be over at RAM. I want next time for us to have a bigger space to have this conversation. And I know each of you can go out and talk to 5 more people about what you're hearing about here tonight, about the need for transportation. Colebrook Village, again, hate to keep going back to the same topic, but we couldn't get people for employees unless they had a car because they don't have any transportation. If they're living in, one of the outlying areas, they have to have reliable transportation. They can't get here. They can't work here. So we need to start looking at all of our infrastructure. And again, just being open to facing, what it is that we want. What can be done to create more housing? Let's get ideas around the table. We've done so much in the last several years, from the pollinator pathway to, the airline trail things. And we've done amazing things in this town. There's nothing that should hold us back from doing this as well.
To create additional housing opportunities in communities, you really need to leverage partnerships. I served, heard some of the municipal offices. Other people knit. I collected municipal office. Like, there's not a single municipal office I didn't hold. And I can tell you that this question, in terms of what municipalities can do, they really need to leverage partnerships. They need to know that their neighbors, the neighbors in the community, have their backs. And, oh, by the way, if there's a retired banker on Board of Finance, maybe she can talk to, somebody in the institution from where she retired. Make those connections. Start those conversations. I will tell you, in the city of New London, one of these conversations occurred about something called care and board. Care and boards are, they're almost like an assisted living without the assistance. Somebody's awake, and it depends on the level of care, but there's 3 meals a day, et cetera, and there's somebody always there. There's recreational opportunities, but people live independently. So I'm talking about the increase that we see in the city of New London for our region of elderly in our homeless shelters. We had an 89-year-old person in our homeless shelter. It's immoral. I don't know how else to say it. It's immoral. So going to the town and saying, we've got an idea, will you help us flesh it out? Will you pave the way for us? Led to the acquisition of 9,000 square feet directly across from the hospital by a private company that's looking to establish care and boards right across the street from the hospital. So, leveraging conversations, whether you're sitting around at, the football game on Friday night or at the pancake dinner. Do you guys have a VFW in Hebron? Yeah, at the VFW. So, have those conversations, make those connections, support your towns in this effort. The other final thing, and I'll just say this, CHEO is focused on having regional conversations. CHEO is also interested in acting as a resource for those towns that I know all too well have very little in terms of staff, and it's very hard to be proactive when you're just trying to keep up and do more with less, right? So we, and I'm sure the Department of Housing and the partnership and the faith community and service providers, Alzheimer's, we're all here to act as resources for the town. So, look outside of town hall at where you can leverage those relationships.
I'm going to continue to talk about partnerships as our state rep is having to go somewhere else. But one of the shout-outs I want to say, particularly to this town, is what has worked is we have found a way to collaborate with our state and local leaders, our town selectmen, our town staff, partnerships in the nonprofit community, our own faith community here, other groups. Code, of course, has been a beacon of light and leadership in this area. But we have done this as a partnership, private, public, just people with passion who care about this work. And that's really what's making the difference here. In other towns surrounding us where people are opposing this kind of work, here we are in Hebron. Who would have thought? But it's happening because we have chosen to work collaboratively together because we believe in this across the board. So that I think that is the piece that I would like to really talk about. I just want to say, and that whole point of how this happens and it builds community, I'll give you another example, is the Flower Girl restaurant in the center of town right now. She has great food, but the truth of the matter is she's creating a whole identity, a new identity for the village. And we all feel it and we can sense it. And I'm very proud of the people of this congregation who let her start her business in that kitchen and out of this parish hall during COVID. So kudos to the people of this community who helped her get her commercial license So she employs 45 people in the center of the village now. And she has vision and she has passion. She has 3 restaurants. So this is how much passion it has. So, and she is building community in what she's doing. And the thing is, this is her time to do this now in the village, but this has happened here and in towns all across the state before. Before there was a restaurant in the where the Flower Girl Cafe is now. Many of you remember Jim Cilio's parents, who ran the general store here for decades in that very same space. In their time, they built community in that location with that use at that time. And so, it goes back to the building of community, working together. I'm not going to even touch on the finances, because when I started this work 2 years ago, I had a full head of hair and it was dark brown. So you can see, getting into the financing of these projects is truly amazing and complicated and difficult, and yet, we have great people who want to support us. And infrastructure is the last thing I want to mention. We have run out of water in Hebron, so we couldn't even build our housing project. So God provided an answer. St. Peter's bought 17 acres of land, the field next to us down to the Jeremy River. And lo and behold, what did we discover on that land? Water. Not just for our housing, but if this becomes what we really think it will be. So in addition to doing the housing project, we are now developing community wells that we hope will benefit the entire community of Hebron and allow further expansion of the village center. But it takes a village, it takes everyone coming together with a similar vision and willing to put aside ego and roll up your sleeves.
So since we heard your pitch, I'll be sure to share with our team some of the needs here. I'll say, what can be done, any and everything. So the fact that we're here having this conversation, that's a great start. Communities simply need to act, and this is a part of your action. But the Department of Housing, we've not seen this level of investment in terms of an administration making allocations of somewhere around $800 million into housing. It's huge. In addition, the State Department of Housing is now considered a standalone agency and not housed in another department. So that simply says we're onto something, and it allows us as an agency or a department to do more. Obviously, there are intersections between environment, DSS, DEMIS, you name it, but we're able to really stand on our own 2 feet and really do some yeoman's work with respect to our mission. So I think when you begin, from creating and preserving housing of all kinds, from home ownership to rental, housing is needed in all economic bands. And so the State Department is positioned to help at a lower and middle income bands, if you would. We have both funding, and this is for you, and technical assistance for towns from both state and federal resources. A community simply has to choose what they want to do, and we can help you make that a reality. But we won't force it on any community what our thoughts are on what you need for your community. But the reality is there are many buckets of resources, opportunities to help address the barriers that you all might be faced with in this particular community as you all think innovatively, creatively, and really challenge yourselves to think differently with respect to housing. So I'm not going to break down all of the funding resources, but please know that there are definitely opportunities to engage at this level.
Thank you. So now the last shall be first. Pam. So this is the last of our more formal panel questions before we move on to the questions that were written by the audience. So Pam, the last question is, can you tell us about any communities making progress on this issue? And what are they doing and how are they doing it?
That's a great and interesting question of which I have no answer. However, I think I know it when I see it. All right, so I'm going through the towns because I do coaching all over the state and even beyond the state borders. And I think about who's doing it well. And I'm not so sure Hebron wants to be West Hartford or Hebron wants to be even Glastonbury. But here's what I know it when I see it. The communities that are doing it well are bold. I can remember when I was a Sweet Adeline and Mom and I headed out to Vegas. We should add that to my bio. I'm a Vegas singer. So, just saying. They would take an old hotel and just rip it down and build something new. And all I could think was, we would never do that in New England. There's history there. You know what? Maybe it's time to start tearing down some old and building something new. I don't know, but they're bold. They're bold. They're also respectful of other people's opinions and positions, and they listen. I think that one of the things, I don't know about you, I hate reading the River East, the first 4, right now 6 or 8 pages, with all of the opinion letters. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I live in these towns. Because people can be really mean and disrespectful. And I don't think that that's ever a good way to create a sense of community to do something new and different. So the communities that are doing it right are respectful. And I also think that they're caring. When my daughter Charlotte came home from high school one day and said, Mommy, I have a new friend. They live in the woods. I was devastated. We have homeless people in this town, folks. We have people who are desperately under-resourced for work, for food, and for housing. And to know that there are kids at the high school who, HIHS, when I was working with the Hebron Greater Together Community Fund, part of that is we funded a project for HIHS to put a mini pantry at the high school. Because the teachers were going and buying stuff because kids had no food. And I think we're better than that. I think we care more about our citizens, about our own neighbors. So I think those are 3 of the characteristics of the towns that are doing it right. But I'll look at my colleagues here who are much more qualified to answer that question.
I'll just talk about a few of the things that I've seen. CHEO just issued the affordable housing plan scorecards for New London County. It was a joint effort between CHEO and Desegregate Connecticut to look at the affordable housing plans for each municipality in the county of New London and score them against the Department of Housing's guidelines in terms of planning for affordability. How do we create a municipal plan? Those plans were intended to have your buy-in. The whole point behind that plan was to sit down with residents and survey what communities' feelings were, what their thoughts were, how they could find opportunity in the face of challenges. So communities are now beginning to take implementation steps on those affordable housing plans. The next counties to have their towns' plans graded are Windham and Tallinn counties, because those are both in the CHEO region. So look for those in a few months out. But supporting your towns in terms of those implementation goals, changing zoning, having, say, the town of Montville has an overlay zone for Route 32, which is a commercial area. You can go in and build multifamily housing as a matter of right in Montville in that floating zone, making it easier, which means, as we all know, less expensive to develop property, and to develop property that makes sense, that it's as of right. And so that you're not having that continual argument about whether it's appropriate or not. That decision's been made. That ship has sailed. So communities are implementing. Ledyard is implementing the expansion of, or trying to get additional funding for the expansion of its sewer and water lines to have its commercial nodes built out a little bit more with housing so that you have housing that's accessible to, say, Walgreens and the grocery store or perhaps the dentist's office. So towns are starting to take those concrete steps, and I look forward to hearing about other communities like Mansfield that has a housing trust fund, money set aside that is paid by developers in lieu of developing affordable housing so that additional opportunities can be created. That's done through town ordinance. So, thank you.
I don't know, whose turn is it? Mine? All right. We're on question 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if it's safe to define progress in the traditional definition of it. I think making progress is acknowledging, at the very least from my perspective, that there is a need. And so sometimes we're a little hard on ourselves, which I want you to be, because I want you to develop housing. But I also want to acknowledge that making progress is really good. But a few examples in terms of communities across the state. The town of Litchfield recently saw the opening of a new home ownership opportunity there. The town of Shelton is home to 2 new projects, Spruce Meadow and Spruce Ridge, rental projects that already have a waiting list for occupancy. The town of Lebanon has identified municipally owned property for development and are pursuing a development partner to bring additional elderly rental housing to that particular community. And their hope is that this will allow existing senior citizens who own in their community to downsize and to create new home ownership opportunities at the same time. So there are opportunities for diversifying your housing stock. A number of our more suburban communities are trying to incentivize the creation of accessory dwelling units. I don't know who mentioned that earlier. And many of our urban centers are looking at mixed-use development, retail on the ground floor, retail condo opportunities above. You'll see that in many of our urban centers. So I think there is just start and partner and have those conversations. But as a representative from the State Department of Housing, we want to engage you and figure out with your town, all of you smart people in this space, how can we make this a reality? And so our doors are open for those conversations. You're going to use my mic now.
I am. Here you go.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were singing.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. I have a mic. That's all I need. People in my church will tell you that. Anyway, a couple of examples that come to my mind are people that we've come across in our infancy in this work here, and that is the Hope Partnership is a group on the shoreline that was largely, again, faith communities coming together, seeing a need, that has built a wonderful project in Old Saybrook right on the Connecticut River. And it's because they have their fire. I mean, I don't know if you know, but in that town, teachers would literally move into the big houses that are rented in the summer, and they would live there, and they'd have to vacate those houses when they became summer rentals. So teachers, firemen, all of that literally would have to leave to live elsewhere so they could make money. You know, I mean, that's the kind of negotiating people were having to do in those shoreline towns, which have bigger challenges. And they don't have sewers, they don't have water lines. And this Hope Partnership's also working in Madison, they're working in Essex. These are towns that are beginning to realize how important this work is. Another is the Northwest Coalition of 5 towns, I believe. And we've talked to those folks as well, thanks to Code. And the town of Washington, one of their board members said, we are nothing but a gated community, and our population is shrinking, which means our tax base is shrinking, and we can't provide essential services. So we're creating gated communities in these little affluent towns. The average price in Washington is $550,000 for a house. in the little town of Washington. But what I want to talk to you about briefly is people have asked, what are you guys doing here? Well, I brought a handout. And if you haven't gotten it yet, it's a colored piece of paper, and it actually has our architect who's here in the second row, Kathy Dorgan, who also happens to be my neighbor, who has dedicated her life as an architect to building affordable housing all over the United States and all over the state of Connecticut. We are blessed to have her. She's designed a affordable housing project in our neighborhood in Mansfield that is they're excavating right now, and it's finally becoming a reality. And she has been our guardian angel, guiding us in terms of how we might approach this. So this is what we hope may be what we're aspiring to look like on this side. On the back side is actually a layout of the 3 acres that the rectory sits on, and how that project would be laid out, 50-some units that would be there, and it would integrate the rectory actually would become part of the affordable housing project and save a very important historic building here in Hebron. So we would save that, but it would become affordable housing and no longer the residence of the rector. And we're working with the church. I'm wearing 2 hats here, but I have to be very clear which one I'm wearing at what time. But anyway, you can see that this does not look like the kind of housing that people have in their minds. There's another handout that Code provided. If you want to see what mixed income affordable housing projects look like, there's an 8-page handout of all over the country, some of Kathy's work, some stuff that's in Connecticut, stuff all over the country of, in amazing places that you wouldn't imagine you would find mixed income affordable housing, and they're beautiful, So I just invite you to really open your mind and your heart to what it can be and what it actually is now.
Oh my God. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna use it. I know. No, it's okay. It's just I'm uncentered now. So I know I've been taking a lot of notes, and I just want to note that this has been a really exciting conversation, and I'm learning a lot just by participating in this panel conversation. I've been with the partnership for about 8.5 years, and I've spent 7 years at the partnership focusing around housing policies to address the need of people experiencing homelessness. So I am new to the affordable housing space, and this question, when I saw it, I was like, oh Lord, I don't know how I'm gonna answer this. But like we mentioned before, leveraging our partners, right? So I called a friend and I was like, okay, what's happening in your area? So just sharing from the other side of the state, the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunities shared the following thoughts with me, and I'm gonna share those with you. And she noted that there's been a lot of progress happening in the small rural communities in Litchfield County, and some of them are similar to Hebron, Marlborough, Columbia, and Andover. And pretty much all of them are spearheaded by local nonprofits with volunteers from the community, and they're being supported by the center through their shared staff capacity building program and housing development consultant. And they have about 145 affordable housing units in the pipeline now that could be under construction in 2024 in 15 small towns. And last night, the Litchfield County had the Housing Affordability Summit where they highlighted 18 housing developments and progress in their small towns. And all of these projects, they're very different. So some of them are rehab projects, some of them are new constructions, and some of them are single family home ownership, and others are multifamily rental units, and all of them range between 2-unit projects and 32-unit projects. So I would say if you want to learn more about that, I would say bring the Litchfield County director to the table, maybe a future conversation, so that she can, and other partners who are working on those projects can share those as well. But the only thought that I will add is that we are at the partnership. We are always looking to collaborate with towns, rural as well as suburban, to create and preserve more affordable housing in our state. And really, this is an opportunity for Hebron, Marlborough, Columbia, and Andover to be intentional and to lead in the space. So that's all I'm gonna add. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the more formal part of the panel presentation tonight. And now we're going to be doing something a little bit more fun. So Brandon, you'll be able to riff now. All right, so these are questions from the audience. So for the sake of time, because there's quite a few questions here, I'm just going to have one of the panelists just grab the question and answer it for us. So first one is, I learned yesterday that the federal guidelines for affordable housing isn't really affordable. A condominium development in Marlborough being built right now will have affordable units that cost $300,000. This is not affordable. How do we ensure that affordable housing is truly affordable? Anybody want to take that one? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. First and foremost, I'm not a developer, so let's just put that out there. So I'm giving you some anecdotal feedback here. I agree with whoever wrote the question. That's not affordable. But the reality is, on behalf of the department, we require developers to incorporate affordable options for residents. So when we're building up their financial deck and we're trying to help out with gap funding, it's required that at least 80% sometimes or less, maybe give or take, these units are affordable, meaning 30% of one's income is housing, not 75, 90%. So there are ways that we can drive affordability, however you want to define it. But there are ways that we can manage that with a lot of the projects that we take on, or at least we support, whether it's DOH or CHFA. We're able to kind of push the needle there forward.
All right, thank you. All right, next question from the audience. What type of tax breaks or other programs do towns east of the river receive for affordable housing? How do we compare that with towns in southwest Connecticut, i.e. Fairfield County?
Well, so there are low cost, there's LIHTC credits, which are low income, I'm going to mangle it, tax credits that go to developers for developing certain projects. There are also certain funding streams but they're not really tax breaks. Communities can't, under our statutes, tax any more or any less than the state legislature allows them to. So certain communities have taken the opportunity to do tax incremental financing or to do abatements for certain improvements on properties that have been particularly difficult to develop. For instance, in the city of New London, when I sat on city council, there was phase one of Shaw's Landing. It was condominiums going into downtown New London, which was at that time unheard of. It was a very difficult site. It was a dirty site. It's right up against the train tracks. It's got a beautiful view of the harbor. So there was some cleanup to be done and the like, and it was a tough sell. But it was an opportunity to increase home ownership in the city center of New London. And so the city council decided that under a incremental financing or tax incremental assessment to assist the developer in that way. But at the state level, Bridgeport doesn't get any better tax breaks than, say, Mansfield. I will say taxes have come up a couple of times, and I just want to pause 1 second. I sat with someone in the town of Old Saybrook who's concerned. The projections show that Old Saybrook is going to go from 10,000 households to 8,500 households. The high school graduated 90 students last year, and the entering kindergarten class had 60. That's a community that's dying.
Yes.
So, so just on the issue of property taxes, fewer households means the higher tax burden for the households that are there.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next question. Is there any thought about passing legislation to stop corporations, I love this one, from buying homes and then charging exorbitant rent? That's a good one.
Well, there are no elected officials up here. I think we had one, but I don't see him anymore. Oh, he had another event. I'm sure there are conversations. I know just a session ago, we, as the legislature, we were really looking at ways to preserve opportunities for communities to maintain their infrastructures and their buildings without corporations coming in, heavy hand approach, buying up and doing whatever they want. But oftentimes it's really hard, right? And so I'm sure there are conversations happening, but I encourage you to reach out to your elected officials and have that conversation, and also have a conversation with your municipal leadership before you go to the state, so that you all are working in tandem on policies that would help to protect your neighborhood.
Because you can bet that those corporations have their ears as well. All right, next question from the audience. How many jobs are currently available in Hebron? And what is the annual salary being paid for the currently available jobs? A little bit more on Hebron. Does the town of Hebron have access to the state or federal funds as a result of having affordable housing? That's a two-part question there.
So the latter part, because I don't know much about the town in terms of why am I answering all the questions? I think I've already answered the latter part of that question. The state is willing to partner with any town, municipal government with respect to housing and the development, preservation of it. But unfortunately, I don't know how much folks are making here in town. I think you all are super wealthy. A lot of money out here. I don't know. Maybe our in-house person here could help us out.
Oh, thank you.
So I don't know any of the real stats. Maybe somebody else in the audience knows better. I will tell you that when we started Colebrook Village, we were hiring about 35 to 40 different people. Most of them were making minimum wage. So we're talking about housekeepers, maintenance, CNAs, and I had to convince the management to offer what they more than what they were suggesting. They wanted them to start at $13.20 an hour, and that was in 2018. So, yeah, I know it's disgusting, and you know, as my son used to work over at the gas station. I said to him, I don't care what you're doing this summer, but I don't care if you go work at the gas station. So he did. Brilliant child. So, and he was making minimum wage. You know, the majority of the businesses in town are not the ones that are making the affordability to live in Hebron. So when you work in Hebron, it's not, for the most part. Obviously, some of us who own our own businesses or have, other, big organizations, and maybe we work remotely from home, that's different. But the majority of employment in town is not huge money.
I remember seeing the advertisement for someone to work with for the town maintenance department.
Yeah.
Doing snow trucks and that, and it required all kinds of
Oh yeah,
history, $14 an hour.
yeah. Yeah, you have to have certifications and credentials and licenses, and you're still making minimum wage, or maybe a little bit more. My son Tom is now doing security, not at the gas station, but and he's all excited because he's making $20 an hour. I'm still paying his rent, so I don't know how,
And
it's a challenge.
household income in Hebron, okay, it's about 2 years ago, $122,000.
Well, and I did a little bit of research on that too. So yeah, we had first of all in Connecticut, 39% increase in homelessness in Connecticut just since the pandemic, and part of that's because of the challenges with rents. The increases in rents in Hebron went from 2022 to 2023. Excuse me, in Connecticut, rents increased from 13 to 21%. Now, I don't know about your salaries, but our salaries didn't go up 13 to 22%. I mean, that's insane. So it's a real challenge.
Yeah, of course.
Just quickly add to that, I had to quickly pull up our housing data profile just to answer the medium household income for your area. So what it's saying, and it might be different, right? The last time it was updated was last year. So for renters living in Hebron, the medium household income is around 47,813. And then for homeowners, it's about 133,203. And then for all of it, the average is around 126. So you make with what you will, but those are some of the numbers based upon what's.
I just want to add that over a quarter of the people that live in this town are considered housing burdened. Both renters and homeowners are housing burdened.
Right. So this is a great question, and I think all of you in the audience are going to get something out of this one. What would be the key talking points when we're out in the community talking about affordable housing?
Oh, I have the mic here.
Where'd my girl Stephanie go? So Stephanie Browder's in the back corner. We at CHEO have been working on narrative change playbook for Eastern Connecticut. We did a listening session of key stakeholders throughout the region. Again, the region for CHEO is New London, Wyndham, and Tallinn counties. So, and then we deployed a survey, and it went out to over 20,000 people through a combination of being on the front page of, I think, the Willimantic Chronicle, and a couple of the state representatives, senators put it in their newsletters. We didn't get a whole lot of response, which isn't unusual. We had a meeting last week where someone said you really don't get response about housing unless there's an application, right? Unless there's a driver for it. So we continue to work. Is that true, Stephanie? On narrative change. We worked with an organization called The Case Made, which has done narrative change work throughout the country, both in terms of homelessness and housing. In particular, that's their focus. And so I just reviewed the draft playbook today, which will be going to our 35-member committee next week for review and input. So look forward to that playbook coming out. More importantly, is a toolkit, right? I'm new to this position. I'm new. The CHEO has been in existence for about a year. I've been in my position for about 7 months. So there's a toolkit, and there are a lot of nonprofits that use toolkits. That's why it's something new to me. But it gives you the ability to turn it out to the constituents, your neighbors, your friends. It shows how to sign up for testimony, how to write a letter to the editor, how to get involved in, say, your local housing authority or nonprofit mission-driven developer. That sort of thing. So look for that as well. And we're going to hope to be doing citizen training on narrative change. Focus on why we're here. We love it here, right? We love it here. We let's remember, let's be optimists. We're here because we love it, and we want other people to be here too. So let's get rid of that negative narrative, and use it to our advantage and say, yes, but I love it here, and I want other people to be here that will love it just as much as me. So
Thank you, Beth.
housing cost burden.
Housing cost burden.
Housing cost burden, which means they pay more than 30% of their income to simply maintain housing. It's in our 25%, yes. And it's higher among people renting than it is among homeowners even. Huh? 67% among renters are housing cost burden in this town, which is, a huge amount. So, yeah, that's what that was about, so.
So we're going to wrap up the questions from the audience. One last question. What financial resources or grants are available to support the construction or renovation of affordable housing in rural areas?
Again, we have resources available, so I'm more than happy to engage with any appropriate person in that space in the room here. But we have resources available.
I want to say something about the Department of Housing. We were invited, our board, for a meeting online with the commissioner, who made a personal guarantee that this project in Hebron she's taking very, very personally and simply wants to make this happen, and has assigned some of her best lieutenants to actually make this happen. So, and the funding, our first big loan, our pre-development loan, is in the hopper right now at DOH, so anything you can do, my friend, to get those papers signed and get that check written, we will be very, very grateful. Thank you.
So I just want to add one last thing before we wrap up for the evening. Just a show of hands, who in the audience is a resident of Hebron? Awesome. So I just wanted to say, it's kind of a pithy expression, but be the change you want to be. There are going to be some upcoming opportunities for residents of Hebron to volunteer on some very important commissions in the town of Hebron in the coming year. First one being the Charter Revision Committee, which is very important. Also, there's going to be a Housing Choices Committee that's going to be created. So I encourage each and every one of you to look deeply into your hearts and your calendars and please volunteer for those important commissions. If we have the right people on those commissions, I am assured that great change will come. So I just wanted to shout that out. And Amy's going to wrap us up.
First, I want to say thank you very much to each of one of you for sharing your expertise and your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Claudia, for guiding this conversation. It was very informative, and we appreciate it. We want to thank the Democratic Town Committee for their support of this event. And, yay. I wanted to, somebody mentioned having a voice in the Hebron Housing Choices Plan. And as Claudia was mentioning, there's going to be upcoming opportunities for you, but the most pressing one is on Thursday at the library at 7 o'clock at night. There's a town meeting where it's an in-person vote to move forward the formation of a Housing Choices Plan Advisory Committee, which Code has a seat at the table. There's opportunity for 3 other people to sit on those, the committee, 3 other community members to sit on the committee. So please think about whether or not you're able to volunteer. Also, I want to say that on our website, and we have a few handouts here as well, but on our website, we have the demographics of each town, Hebron, Marlboro, Andover, and Columbia, as far as their cost burden, how many people are living in the town, and such as that. And then there's also links to each town's affordable housing plans. Then we also have links to the videos that were referenced for the Northwest Affordable Housing video. That's on our website as well. So if you'd like to check out different ideas on how or what affordable housing would look like. And we will be emailing all the attendants tonight to link the resources that we've talked about. Code always welcomes new members. We're always looking for people who will work with us to increase community awareness about housing and about education and diversity related issues. So please join us. We would love to have you. Please, you can check out our website. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.